Okay, so the timer started, so I know the camera's recording now. So I wanted to spend a few moments, and I know I open up almost everything by saying that, talking about Marx and his theory of alienation. So a brief disclaimer about Karl Marx. Of course, his political theories and the way that he feels the political environment should operate, obviously controversial, but is still essentially a viable political theory in some circles. We have yet to see what we would say would be pure Marxism worked out in society. All of that aside, a lot of Marx's economic theories are where people who read literature and literary critics really sort of kick in. And so what they do is that they take a lot of Marx's economic theories and they see how they fit with pieces of literature. Now, the thing about this is that for a lot of our modern works from about the 20s onwards to today, we see one of Marx's theories probably fit better than most other theories. So, for instance, we have ennui as a theory as to why people are struggling so much and then sort of unruddered in their lives. Same thing with existentialism. But Marx's theory of alienation, not surprisingly, brings it down to a product of capitalism. And so what Marx will say is, by living in a capitalistic fueled society, workers will experience and individuals will experience what he calls alienation. Okay, and this alienation takes on 4 different forms. I'm not going to go through them all. You know, Wikipedia those or Google those. And so I wanted to bring up, though, like one of the things that he says, he used as an example, is the worker's alienation from himself, the worker's alienation from his work, the worker's alienation from other workers. But one of the examples he has is, if you take a look in the 1800s, for instance, he would say you would have somebody who's a cabinet maker, and so he would build cabinets all day and take pride in that particular work. He was not replaceable. He was the cabinet maker of that village or town or something of that nature, a small area. And at the end of the day, he could say, look, I produced this cabinet. This is something that is mine, my particular style. My techniques are all within this cabinet, and now I will sell this cabinet to somebody else. But in the end, even though they own it, it's still my cabinet. In other words, I built it. You can't take that away from me, etc., etc. And so we see what Marx would say in this theory of alienation. As factories and capitalistic economies have come to the foreground, what happens is that workers become alienated from their products. So, for instance, what you would have, if you know, in the 1920s, Henry Ford will put together the assembly line, where a worker will basically be in charge of one task on the assembly line. That's all they do all day. So put in that lug nut or whatever, okay? And they will do that one lug nut for 20, 30, 40 times a day and produce a car overall. But the alienation is that it's not their car. They didn't really do anything special to create it like our cabinet maker did. They just became somebody who could put that lug nut in. That lug nut's not theirs. They don't really see any profit from it. They don't see any relationship between their labor and their paycheck. In other words. And so as a result, you see that workers, and according to Marx, workers in a capitalistic system will find themselves just sort of disenfranchised from everything that goes on around them. They show up, they do their work, they come home, and that alienation carries over across the board. They have no real purpose or meaning other than to participate in this capitalistic system, which strips away most of their identity. Workers are alienated from other workers. They don't really get to talk to the other lug nut guy or whatever. They know that somebody who wants to be hired can easily replace them, so they're not going to work together. They know that when they get home, they have nothing really to show for it, just the salary itself. In Marx's formulation, in capitalistic society, we're like, of course, we get paid for our time. But in Marx's formulation, that disconnect, that alienation, I built this, means I get this money, has gone away to I was there for a certain period of time and I get paid in some sort of abstract concept, yet this guy over here gets tons more money. And so we see in this theory of alienation, again, I'm just trying to keep it fairly straightforward and simple, but we see this appearing in literature too. We can apply this Marxist theory to the literature, that we have people who endlessly pursue wealth, so that's Scott Fitzgerald, but are alienated from everything that goes on around them. That's Scott Fitzgerald. We can talk about people in different books that we have on our list in which people go from, and so for instance, Blood on the Forge is one that's on our list, and where somebody goes from an agrarian society in which they're sort of indentured servants, but they take pride in their work. They grow the crops, they eat those crops, they go to the market and they sell that corn or whatever they were growing, and they have an intrinsic value that was their corn. They grew it from it as a little baby ear or whatever that you want to say. But when they go to industry and they're building or they're working in a steel foundry, they don't really have any invested interest in the final product. It's something that's completely abstract. So that guy with the lug nut, he just focused on getting that lug nut in right, okay, or else he'll get fired. He doesn't really have a concept of the Model T being his vehicle, like it wasn't his thing. Instead, he's just the guy who puts in a lug nut every day, and at most, that one lug nut, he put that in there really good, and that's all he can really take pride in. So as we think about Marx's theory of alienation, I want you thinking about how class appears in our works. Is this alienation happening to our characters? Are they just unable to fit in with anything around them because of this alienation? They no longer have something that's in the capitalistic side they can take pride in. Instead, they just kind of work, and then they get some money for that work, and it's all very abstract. There's nothing there that they can say, yes, I did that. And Marx would even go so far as to say, like, when you take a look at the average worker, of course this theory is in the 20s and stuff, but it might carry over today. If you look at the average worker, they're so alienated they can't even do a hobby, because by the time they're done with their work day, they're too exhausted really to go into that. And so he would say, if you take a look at that, even they can't even go home and whittle something and try to sell that on Etsy or something like that nature. But basically he will say that the capitalistic work environment, with all of its demands and abstractions and inability for people to take pride in, that eventually comes back to alienate everybody from every aspect of their life. And so you can believe it or not, okay? And I'm not saying that you have to be anti-capitalistic or pro-Marxist or anything. I'm just saying, though, that Marx's theories can often be applied to literature, and often are, okay, applied to literature. Just give us another angle or viewpoint in which to decipher the intentions of the characters and their motivations, the intentions and motivations of the authors, those sorts of things. So just like post-colonialism or feminism, deconstructionism, any other type of theory, Marxism and Marxist critical theory will take a look at the class structure, those theories of alienation, and see how they help us interpret what's going on in those particular stories. Again, with any type of literature or any type of theory, you're not wrong unless you can't prove it, okay? You're only wrong if you can't prove something. So if you want to say this is a feminist criticism of this work and you can prove it, that's fine. Somebody else can take that same work and say, no, this is a Marxist criticism of this work. That's fine. The key is that you proved it, okay? And that's where you need to really start thinking about your final paper. How can I prove this? You will be just as right as anybody else who provides evidence. If you don't provide evidence, it doesn't matter what theory you use or what angle that you take, you'll be wrong. Okay, so the key is the evidence here, and again with Marx's theory, the evidence that people are looking for to help them interpret will be class-based, trying to figure out where these ideas of alienation come in. Why are people feeling so disconnected from society? And Marx will say it's because capitalism, in its best and most purest form, is also the one that basically makes the workers feel outside of themselves. They can't really attach themselves to anything in society. So that's Marxist theory of alienation. in a nutshell. And so again, there's 4 different types of alienation, and it's more complex than what I put down there. That was just sort of the big stuff, and I wanted to highlight stuff I think that will most impact what we're doing this semester. But again, if you just type in Marx's theory of alienation in Google, you can read more about it at your leisure. Again, there's no endorsement or denial of any particular critical theory in any of your English classes that you'll ever have. It's just basically, again, can you prove what you're trying to do? So that's Marx's theory of alienation, again, in a nutshell. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.